What happens when the one man in Providence who never needs to shout gets threatened by someone who has never been told no? Drop a comment telling us the exact second you think this young man realized his last name could not save him. Because in this fictionalized courtroom drama inspired by the spirit of Caught in Providence, justice does not arrive with sirens. It arrives with silence. And before this is over, a senator's son will walk in grinning, walk out shaking, and learn that 5 minutes can destroy a career built on arrogance and begin a life built on truth. At 9:06 on a gray Monday morning, the hallway outside Providence Municipal Court at 325 Washington Street smelled like wet wool, old paper, and burnt coffee from the vending machine near the elevators. People shifted in metal chairs with ticket folders on their laps. A mother bounced a toddler on her knee. A delivery driver in a neon safety jacket stared at the floor. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the most powerful moments in a courtroom are not the loud ones. They are the moments when the truth finally speaks for itself. The cameras for the court show were already set. Red tally lights blinked softly. A boom mic floated above the first row. The courtroom itself was smaller than most people imagined from television. Wood paneling, city seal on the wall, fluorescent lights humming overhead. The bench polished so often it caught the morning glare like still water. Share this with someone who needs to see what real accountability looks like, because everyone in that room would later say the air changed before the first word was even spoken. Judge Frank Caprio sat with his hands folded, glasses low on his nose, studying a thin cream-colored folder marked PMC 221847. He looked calm, almost too calm. That was always the thing about him. He never performed authority. He carried it lightly, and that made it heavier. Like this video, if you believe kindness is not weakness, especially when it stands in the path of entitlement. Then the door opened. Adrian Vale stepped in like the room belonged to him. 27 years old, 6'2", fresh haircut with the sides clipped tight, Tom Ford navy suit, white shirt with the first button open just enough to say rules were for other people, Rolex Submariner flashing under the courtroom lights, Italian leather loafers without socks. His car keys dangled from one finger, the black BMW M8 key fob catching a camera glint as he moved. He had the easy posture of a man who had spent his whole life watching doors open before he reached them. People knew his face before they knew his name. His father, Senator Marcus Vail, had held office for nearly 20 years. His campaign signs had been on lawns from Cranston to East Providence. His son had been in magazines, charity galas, yacht fundraisers, and city blogs that described him as the next generation of public leadership. Drop a comment telling us if you think family power helps people too much or hurts them in the end, because Adrian had grown up hearing that his future was not something he would build. It was something waiting for him. He did not take a seat where defendants usually sat. He took the seat closest to the aisle, crossed one leg over the other, and whispered something to the attorney beside him that made him smirk. The attorney was Evan Mercer, 43, silver tie, careful hair, expensive briefcase, and the tired expression of a man who had already warned his client 3 times not to act like himself. On the second row sat Senator Marcus Vail's chief aide, Denise Halpern, typing on her phone with the speed of someone managing damage before damage fully existed. Court clerk Maria DeLuca called the case in a measured voice that landed clean against the wood and tile. Case PMC 221847, Adrian Marcus Vail, 3 municipal citations, reckless operation on Westminster Street, failure to yield at a marked crosswalk, disorderly conduct following a traffic incident. It sounded almost small when she said it. That was the first trick of the morning. Because the paper version of what happened on March 14, 2022, at exactly 8:17 p.m. on the corner of Westminster and Dorrance was small. A few lines, a few codes, a few penalties, but paper cannot smell hot rubber. Paper cannot hear a little girl screaming when a car misses her by less than a foot. Paper cannot show a bike messenger folding to pavement with his wrist under him at the wrong angle. And paper cannot capture what Adrian Vale said after it happened. When Judge Caprio looked up, the room quieted the way churches quiet when the organ stops. "Good morning, Mr. Vale." Adrian nodded once. "Morning." "No, Your Honor." "Not yet." That was the kind of thing a lot of people missed about arrogance. It does not always arrive as an insult. Sometimes it arrives as subtraction, a missing courtesy, a missing conscience, a missing understanding that everyone else in the room is just as human as you are. Judge Caprio glanced at the file. "You are represented by counsel." Mercer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Evan Mercer for Mr. Vale. My client would like to resolve this matter today. He has no prior record in this court. We believe this was an unfortunate misunderstanding compounded by media attention." The judge nodded slowly. "Media attention." He let the word sit. The camera operator near the back shifted his weight. A woman in the gallery leaned forward. Officer Raymond Silva, the court bailiff, folded his hands at his belt and watched Adrian the way seasoned officers watch men who mistake comfort for control. Because this was not an ordinary ticket hearing. 3 rows back sat Louis Ortega in a black wrist brace and gray work hoodie, his bike helmet resting on his knee. Beside him sat Tasha Green, 34, nursing assistant, still in lavender scrubs after a night shift at Rhode Island Hospital. Her daughter Nia sat tucked against her side in a bright yellow cardigan, inhaler clipped to a small unicorn purse. On the aisle sat Alina Pike, 68, retired school secretary, cane across her lap, left ankle wrapped beneath sensible shoes. 3 victims. 3 separate stories. One rich young man who thought they were background. Judge Caprio turned a page. "Mr. Mercer, before we discuss resolution, I want to make sure I understand what happened. The report says your client's vehicle entered the crosswalk while pedestrians were present." Mercer lifted his chin. "Your Honor, no contact was made with any pedestrian. There was confusion, a bicycle clipped the vehicle, tempers rose, and my client was cited in the heat of the moment." Louis's jaw tightened. Tasha looked down at Nia's small hand, gripping her sleeve. Adrian leaned back and spoke for the first time without being asked. "This is getting blown way out of proportion." There it was. The first crackle in the room. Judge Caprio looked at him over his glasses. "That may be, or it may not be. We will find out." If you've ever seen a person walk into consequences thinking they're walking into inconvenience, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Adrian did not know, what nobody on YouTube thumbnails ever tells you, is that the downfall never starts at the threat. It starts much earlier. It starts the moment someone stops listening. Adrian Vale had been raised in a 5-bedroom brick house on Blackstone Boulevard with framed campaign photos in the study and polished speeches at the dinner table. His father, Marcus Vale, was the kind of politician who could make eye contact with donors, janitors, and reporters in the same room and make each of them feel chosen. His mother, Olivia Vale, had been the softer presence. Former elementary school music teacher. Pearl earrings. Linen dresses. She died when Adrian was 19, after an 18-month fight with pancreatic cancer that hollowed the family from the inside out. People in Providence told themselves grief might humble him. It didn't. Not at first. It made him harder. By 27, Adrian had turned charm into currency. He worked as director of outreach for his father's political action committee, though half the office whispered he only showed up for camera-friendly events. He wore tailored jackets, drove the 2022 BMW M8 competition his father insisted was leased through the campaign donor network, and built a social media presence around civic ambition, gym photos, and expensive watches photographed beside black coffee and policy books he never finished. He had a law school acceptance deferred twice. He was rumored to be planning a city council run. He told friends he was born for public life. He also had a temper. Not explosive, controlled, worse maybe, the kind that smiled while humiliating waiters, the kind that tipped generously only after making service workers earn it, the kind that treated police officers one way if cameras were around and another way if they were not, the kind that assumed rules could be negotiated if the right name was said at the right volume. On March 14, Providence was slick with late winter rain. At 7:58 p.m., Adrian left a fundraiser at the Graduate Providence wearing the same navy suit, same watch, same half-drunk confidence. At 8:04, he ignored 2 calls from Denise Halpern and 1 from his father. At 8:09, he answered a text from a woman saved in his phone as Maddie Brown U. At 8:12. Traffic backed up on Westminster near Dorrance as pedestrians crossed from the theater district. At 8:17, everything changed. Luis Ortega had been riding south after delivering Thai food on Union Street. He was 31, father of a 4-year-old boy named Mateo, saving money for HVAC certification by day and working deliveries at night. He wore a reflective orange jacket over a red sox sweatshirt and carried the exhaustion of a man doing 3 lives at once. His front tire entered the crosswalk just as Tasha Green stepped off the curb holding Nia's hand. Alina P. Ike was 2 steps behind them, cane touching the painted stripe. The BMW came through the light too fast. Not race car fast. Rich man fast. Confident fast. The kind of fast that assumes everyone else will get small. Lewis saw headlights slide where headlights should not be and swerved left. His tire clipped the curb. His body hit the pavement shoulder first. Tasha yanked Nia backwards so sharply the little girl lost 1 sneaker. Alina twisted, stumbled, and went down on 1 knee, palm scraping asphalt. The BMW stopped half inside the crosswalk with the hood angled toward the 3 of them. Witnesses, later, disagreed about the exact speed. They agreed on the sound. Brakes screaming, bike metal skidding, Nia's cries slicing straight through traffic noise. Adrian got out furious. Not scared, furious. He looked first at the scrape on his passenger side fender. Then at Lewis on the ground. Then at the gathering crowd. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted. "You hit my car." Lewis, trying to sit up with 1 hand, stared at him in disbelief. "You came through the crosswalk." Tasha pulled Nia against her chest. The child was wheezing now, those short, tight breaths that every parent of an asthmatic child recognizes before a crisis fully blooms. Alina, still on the street, muttered, "Oh God, my ankle." And Adrian, standing in calfskin loafers on wet pavement under the marquee lights, pointed at them like he was assigning blame from a boardroom table. "You people walked late, the signal changed." A bystander named Corey Bell, barber from Elmwood, started recording on his phone. That video would matter later. But not as much as the footage Adrian didn't know existed. Back in court, Judge Caprio closed the file and looked toward the gallery. "Mr. Ortega, Ms. Green, Ms. Pike, I understand you are present. I may hear from you in a moment." Mercer rose again. "Your Honor, respectfully, this is a citation hearing, not a damages proceeding." Judge Caprio gave the smallest nod. "I'm aware of where I am, counsel." The gallery broke into a low wave of nervous chuckles. Adrian didn't laugh. He shifted in his chair for the first time. The judge continued, "And I'm also aware that sometimes a file arrives wearing 1 set of clothes and turns out to be carrying another story underneath." That line hung in the room so perfectly that even the camera operator glanced up from his monitor. It was one of those quotable moments people rewind. One of those lines that sound simple until you realize it has already changed the temperature of the room. Mercer tried again. "My client is prepared to pay the fines. If community concerns exist, we can address those privately." Judge Caprio turned another page, "Privately." Then he lifted a second folder from beneath the first. "Thicker." marked with a yellow evidence tab. That was when Adrian's posture changed. Just slightly. Just enough for Officer Silva to notice. If you're still here, like this video, if you believe the scariest sound in a courtroom is not a gavel, it's a second folder opening. Because this was the moment the room understood the case on paper was not the case in reality. And what came next would make every person in that gallery sit a little straighter. Maria DeLuca handed the judge a USB drive. Mercer frowned. "What is that?" Judge Caprio did not answer immediately. He looked at Adrian first. Then he said, "Evidence I requested after reviewing the officer narrative and supplemental statements. City traffic camera footage from Westminster. Body camera from Officer Daniel Reese. Surveillance video from Del Vecchio Pharmacy. And a written incident report from Rhode Island Hospital documenting a pediatric respiratory delay tied to the scene." The gallery gasped. Not loud. Sharp. Like one body suddenly remembering it had lungs. Tasha lowered her face. Nia leaned into her shoulder. Louis closed his eyes. Adrian turned to Mercer so fast the chair legs scraped. "You said this was just tickets." Mercer spoke without looking at him. "I said that was the original posture." Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Mr. Vale, I'm going to ask you again to slow down and listen. That is not always easy for young men who are used to rooms moving at their speed." A few people exchanged glances. That one landed. Adrian forced a laugh that fooled nobody. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this feels extremely performative." No one moved. Not even the cameras. You could hear the fluorescent lights again. Judge Caprio answered in the same steady tone. "With all due respect, Mr. Vale, truth often feels performative to people who are hearing it for the first time." Quote number 2. Shareable, clean, brutal. Adrian's lips parted, then closed. His fingers tightened around the key fob. Mercer put a hand on his arm. Denise Halpern stopped typing. The monitor on the side wall flickered to life. Black screen. Then timestamp. 3/14/2022, 2017-11. Westminster Street camera. Rain glossed the asphalt silver. Pedestrians wait. D at the corner. Headlights moved through the frame like smeared stars. You could see Louis's bike entering from the left, Tasha and Nia at the curb, Alina one pace behind. Then the BMW came in hard from the right, nose dipping late, too late, cutting across the crosswalk line as Louis veered and went down. The whole room inhaled together. Even though everyone knew what was coming, the impact of almost impact was worse on screen. Nia began to cry softly. Tasha rubbed her back and whispered, "It's okay, baby, it's okay." But then the clip continued past what most people had seen online. Because the public cell phone video stopped after the screech and shouting. The traffic camera did not. Adrian stepped out, looked at his fender, then kicked Louis's bicycle wheel away from his car, hard enough to spin it. Louis winced in the gallery just watching it. Then on video, Tasha can be seen kneeling to reach into Nia's backpack. Her hands move fast, panicked. She finds the inhaler cap but drops it. Alina tries to bend to help and cannot. Adrian points toward them. His mouth moves. There is no audio. But everyone in the courtroom knew exactly what he was saying because body language has its own language. Blame. Dismissal. Contempt. Judge Caprio let the silence stay an extra beat before speaking. "Mr. Vale, is that your vehicle?" Adrian swallowed. "Yes." "Is that you exiting?" "Yes." "Did you, in fact, enter the crosswalk while pedestrians were present?" Mercer stood. "Your Honor, I advise my client not to answer further until we review all supplemental materials." The judge nodded. That is his right. Then he pressed play on the next clip. Officer Daniel Reese's body camera. Audio included. Rain on fabric, police radio crackle, footsteps. You hear Officer Reese approach. Sir, I need you to step back from the bicycle. Adrian's voice comes in hot and clear. Do you know who you're talking to? There it was. The sentence that has ended more reputations than any fine ever written. Officer Reese says, I'm talking to the driver who was inside the crosswalk. Adrian laughs. No, you're talking to Senator Vale's son, so let's not make this embarrassing. In court, somebody whispered, wow. Another person muttered, he really said it. Officer Silva's expression didn't change, but his jaw set. The body cam continued. You hear Tasha saying, breathless, she needs her inhaler. Nia, look at me, baby, look at me. You hear Lewis say, my wrist, man, my wrist is messed up. You hear Alina in pain, and through it, Adrian saying to someone on speakerphone, yeah, get somebody down here. Reese is trying to write me up over nothing. Then the line that made the room go cold. Tell Dad this judge stuff needs to disappear before it ever gets in front of one of Caprio's cameras. Nobody moved. Mercer closed his eyes. Adrian's face drained 2 shades lighter. Denise Halpern stopped breathing long enough to notice she had stopped breathing. Judge Caprio looked down at the bench, then back up. Not angry, not theatrical. Somehow that made it worse. Mr. Vale, he said softly, did you just hear your own voice? Adrian's answer came smaller than anything he had said all morning. Yes. Good, because privilege is loud until evidence starts speaking. Quote number 3. And by now, even people who had come in for parking tickets understood they were watching the kind of moment millions would replay. This was no longer about a rich young man getting corrected. This was about a whole philosophy collapsing in public. Drop a comment telling us whether that single line from the body cam changed the case for you, because for some people the danger is the near collision. For others, it's hearing a human being treat power like a weapon before checking whether anyone is hurt. Adrian looked at Mercer. You told me the audio wouldn't be usable. Mercer turned slowly. I told you I hadn't heard it. That landed like a slap. And for the first time, Adrian looked less like a prince and more like a trapped son. Judge Caprio leaned back. I am not interested in humiliating you, Mr. Vale. Humiliation is easy. Understanding is harder, so let us understand. Ms. Green, would you please come forward? Tasha stood with Nia's hand in hers. Up close, the fatigue in her face showed differently than it had from the gallery. Night shift fatigue, mother fatigue, life fatigue. Her scrubs were clean but wrinkled. Her sneakers had dried salt on the sides from old snow. Her hospital badge still clipped to her pocket read TASHAGRENE, CNA. She took the witness spot and adjusted Nia's cardigan. Judge Caprio softened visibly. Good morning. Tasha nodded. Morning, Your Honor. I understand your daughter was present. Yes, sir. Tell me what happened in your own words. Tasha took a breath. The room stayed absolutely still. I had just picked Nia up from my sister's place on Carpenter Street. I was taking her to Rhode Island Hospital because she'd been tight all day. Weather messes with her asthma. We were crossing on the walk sign. I know it was the walk sign because she likes to count down the number timer and she was at 7. Then I heard the car. It didn't stop where cars stop. It stopped where we were. Nia buried her face in her mother's side. Tasha kept going. I pulled her back hard. She lost her shoe. She started panicking because loud noises scare her when she can't breathe right. Her inhaler was in the backpack, but my hands were shaking, and when I dropped the cap, that lady tried to help us and she fell. She looked toward Alina. And I just remember thinking, not today. Please, God, not today. The gallery was silent in a different way now. Not watching. Feeling. Tasha's voice caught, and he got out mad about his car. Adrian stared down at the table. Not at her. Never at her. Judge Caprio asked gently, "How long before your daughter received treatment?" Tasha swallowed. "About 26 minutes later than we expected. I know because I checked. The report says it wasn't life-threatening, and thank God it was. But if you've ever watched your child fight for air, you don't forget 26 minutes. There are sentences that don't need embellishment." That was one of them. A woman in the back row wiped tears. Lewis lowered his head. Even Mercer's face hardened toward his own client. Judge Caprio nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Green." But Tasha wasn't done. She turned toward Adrian. Not dramatic, not trembling, just done being invisible. "You know what made me the angriest," she said. "It wasn't the speeding. It wasn't even the shouting. It was that you looked at my daughter like she was in your way." Every camera in the room could have zoomed 100 times and still not captured what that did to Adrian's face. Because outrage he could fight. A mother telling the truth without raising her voice. That got through. He shifted, uncrossed his legs, looked up, tried to speak. Nothing came. If you believe a calm witness can hit harder than any lawyer, like this video right now. Because that was the moment Schadenfreude began turning into something more complicated. People still wanted accountability, but they were beginning to see the exact shape of the harm, and that makes justice feel heavier. Judge Caprio thanked Tasha and called Louis Ortega. Louis rose carefully, left hand holding the brace on his right wrist as though it still didn't belong to him. He was lean, unshaven, eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion working men wear because rest is more expensive than coffee. He stood in the witness spot and kept his answers simple. Men like Louis often do, because they learn early that too many words make powerful people impatient. "I was on my delivery route," he said. "I had 2 orders in the thermal bag, green curry and pad CU. I saw the walk signal was active. I saw the car not stopping. I turned to miss the kid." The kid was Nia. He never called her the girl. Maybe that was why the line stayed with people. Judge Caprio asked, "What injury did you sustain?" Urgent care said probable scaphoid fracture. Then orthopedics said fractured scaphoid, ligament strain, shoulder separation. I missed 2.5 weeks of work. Bike got bent. Phone cracked. Couldn't lift my son without pain. That last sentence hit differently. Couldn't lift my son. Adrian finally looked at him. Louis went on. "I'm not suing anybody here. I just want it said out loud what happened. Because I'm tired of people with cars that cost more than my apartment acting like everybody outside their windshield is disposable." Quote number 4. No yelling, no flourish. Just a working man saying the quiet part that usually gets edited out. The gallery responded with a murmur so strong Officer Silva had to glance back once to settle it. Judge Caprio nodded. "Did Mr. Vale ask if you were hurt?" Louis's answer came instantly. "No." "Did he offer assistance?" "No." "Did he apologize?" Louis looked at Adrian for the first time. "No. He told me I should be grateful he wasn't pressing charges for damaging his car." A sound moved through the room, half gasp, half disgust. Adrian whispered, "That's not exactly what I said." Louis snapped back, not louder, just firmer. "Then say what you said." Adrian's mouth opened. Closed. He had no version of that sentence that could survive daylight. Judge Caprio let that silence do the work. Then he called Eleanor Pike. Eleanor took longer to reach the front. Officer Silva stepped forward, offered an arm, and she accepted with a little nod of embarrassment people from her generation still carried even when they deserved help. Her silver hair was pinned neat. She wore a beige raincoat, though she had already taken it off once and put it back on 3 times from nerves. "I was on my way from evening mass," she said. "St. Patrick's. I had my grocery cart with me because I don't drive anymore. The little girl screamed, so I turned, and that's when I went down." "Were You injured. Sprained ankle, bruised knee, scraped hand, nothing dramatic. Then she added, but my dignity took a beating when I was on the ground, and nobody in that shiny car thought I was worth asking about. The room gave a sad little laugh. Eleanor smiled without humor. She looked toward Adrian and said the line people would quote in comment sections for weeks. Young man, a last name can open a door, but it cannot close the truth. Quote number 5. Even Judge Caprio let that sit. Mercer rubbed his forehead. Denise Halpern finally put her phone face down. Adrian stared at the witness stand like it had betrayed him. Because now the case had a shape that no campaign statement could smooth over. A child gasping. A father with a broken wrist. An elderly woman on the pavement. And a man angry about paint on his car. Judge Caprio thanked Eleanor and called for a 5-minute recess before proceeding. That was when the hallway exploded. Not literally. Worse. Whispers, camera whispers, crew whispers, people leaning into each other with that look of I cannot believe we just heard that. Denise rushed toward Adrian. Mercer intercepted her halfway. Officer Silva guided them into a side consultation area. Tasha sat on a bench with Nia in her lap while Louis bought a ginger ale from the machine with his left hand and failed twice before Corey Bell, the barber with the cell phone video, silently helped him. Across the hall, Eleanor called her sister and said, "No, Doris, don't turn the kettle off. This may take a while." And inside the judge's chambers, another document waited that would change the case again. Because there was more. There is always more when a powerful person thinks the official version is the only version. Hit that subscribe button if you already know this is not ending with a simple fine, because the next revelation would do something even the body cam hadn't done. It would show intent. And once intent walks into a courtroom, excuses start dying fast. The extra document had arrived at 8:12 that morning by courier envelope from Del Vecchio Pharmacy, a family-owned store on the corner across from the intersection. The owner, Sal Del Vecchio, 71, had initially told police his outdoor camera probably didn't catch much. Then his granddaughter, who handled the security system, realized the side angle mic had been active. The footage was grainy. The sound was imperfect, but it was enough. When court resumed, Judge Caprio's voice was the same measured instrument it had been all morning. Before counsel and I discuss resolution, there is one additional recording. Mercer stood immediately. Your Honor, I have serious objection to continued evidentiary expansion in a municipal citation matter. I understand, said the judge, and if the evidence lacked relevance, I would share your concern. It does not. Adrian whispered harshly, how much more is there? No one answered him. The footage rolled. This angle showed the right side of the BMW, the sidewalk edge, part of Del Vecchio's awning, and more importantly, the moments just after Officer Reese walked away to check on Nia and Louis. Adrian was standing near the passenger door. Denise Halpern had not yet arrived. There were still only bystanders, victims, and one city parking enforcement worker named Omar Haddad who had stepped in from down the block. On the audio, you could hear rain ticking against the pharmacy sign. Then Adrian's voice. Pick the bike up and move it. I'm not letting this become a scene. Omar says, sir, leave it. Police are handling it. Adrian says, do what I said. Omar answers, no. And then clear as anything. My father funds half the people in this city. If that old TV judge wants a problem, I'll give him one. The courtroom did not gasp this time. It froze. Different thing. Colder thing. Thread. Not heat of the moment rudeness. Thread. Denise closed her eyes as though hearing it for the first time hurt physically. Mercer sat down very slowly, the way lawyers do when they know strategy has just left the building. Adrian leaned forward with both hands on the table, face red now, not pale. That is not what I meant. Judge Caprio's reply came without edge. Then tell me what you meant. I was angry. That explains volume. It does not explain language. I wasn't threatening you personally. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Young man, when a man thinks power means volume, silence terrifies him. That is why you are uncomfortable now. Not because you were misunderstood, because you were heard. Quote number 6. Nobody moved. Somewhere in the back, a reporter scribbled so fast the pen scratched loud enough to notice. Adrian finally lost the cool mask he had been trying to tape back on for an hour. This is unbelievable. We're acting like I committed some major crime because I got upset in traffic. You're making an example out of me because of my father. The judge looked at him for a long moment. No, Mr. Vale, you made an example out of yourself because you believed your father could stand where your character should have been. That line hit like a gavel strike. Even Tasha's eyes widened. Louis stared straight ahead. Elena actually whispered, "Amen." Adrian stood halfway from his chair. Officer Silva took one step forward. Mercer pulled Adrian's sleeve hard enough to wrinkle it. "Sit down," Mercer hissed. Adrian did not sit. "No, I want to understand this. I want to understand why his courtroom gets to become some moral theater every time someone recognizes a famous last name." Judge Caprio answered, "Sit down and I'll help you understand." Adrian hesitated, then sat. The room exhaled. Judge Caprio continued, "The danger in your case is not merely the crosswalk. It is the pattern, the speed, the disregard, the attempt to invoke family influence at the scene, the statement about making a problem for this court, and the human cost that you keep describing as inconvenience." Mercer stood, perhaps sensing his only path left was damage control through contrition. "Your Honor, if the court is willing, my client would like an opportunity to address the victims directly." The judge looked at Adrian. "Do you?" It was the first real choice of the day. Consequence or deeper consequence? Humility or more exposure? Adrian stared at the bench, jaw working. Everyone in the room knew this was the hinge. Everyone. This was the second viewers later replayed and paused and argued about. Was he sorry? Was he calculating? Was this still performance? He stood, turned, faced the gallery, and made the worst choice he could have made. "I'm sorry people got scared," he said, "but this whole thing is being exaggerated beyond reason. Nobody died. Nobody was seriously injured. I said things I shouldn't have said, fine, but let's stop pretending Providence almost collapsed because of one traffic stop." The sound from the gallery was immediate and ugly. Not yelling. Disbelief. Tasha shut her eyes. Louis laughed once, bitter and short. Elena whispered, "Oh dear." Nia asked her mother in a small voice, "Why is he still mad?" That question cut harder than anything else. Because children have a way of summarizing moral failure better than adults do. Judge Caprio lifted one finger, and the room quieted. "Mr. Vale," he said, "you may sit down." Then he reached for another paper. A report. Cream-colored hospital letterhead. Rhode Island Hospital Pediatric Notes. Patient Nia Green. Asthmatic distress episode exacerbated by delayed administration of rescue inhaler after vehicle encroachment event. Recommendation: follow-up stress evaluation due to acute panic response. Tasha lowered her head. Nia looked confused, not knowing her fear had become paperwork. Judge Caprio placed the report down gently. "You say nobody was seriously hurt. The body and the law do not always use the same measuring stick. Fear counts, delay counts, trauma counts. A child remembering the sound of your brakes in her dreams counts." The room was dead silent now. Dead silent in the way rooms get when a moral frame has shifted, and nobody can crawl back to the old one. Like this video, if you believe there are consequences people never see on a citation. Because this was where the case stopped being about points on a license and became about the invisible injuries powerful people call minor. Adrian rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. When he spoke again, the fight was still there but frayed now. "So what do you want me to say?" Judge Caprio did not blink. The truth would be a refreshing start. Adrian laughed once. Not amused, cornered. "The truth? Fine. The truth is everyone expects me to be guilty before I open my mouth. The truth is if my last name were Collins or Murphy or Reyes, nobody would care. The truth is that yes, I was angry, and yes, I said stupid things because every cop, every reporter, every person with a phone was already looking at me like I was exactly who I'm apparently supposed to be." Now it was his turn to say something that landed. Not because it excused him, because it revealed him. Judge Caprio studied him, and who is that? Adrian looked straight at the bench for the first time. A man who never gets the chance to be anything but Senator Vale's son. There it was. Not redemption. Not yet. But the first hairline fracture in the armor. The judge's voice softened by a degree. "That may be painful. It does not make you blameless." Adrian looked away. Judge Caprio nodded. "I think we are finally getting somewhere." If you've watched this far, drop a comment telling us whether that was honesty or self-pity. Because in stories like this, the truth often arrives mixed. One part confession, one part excuse, and what happens next determines which part wins. The next witness was not on anyone's expectation list. Officer Daniel Reese had been called back to court by request. 38, Providence police, broad shoulders, rain-polished boots, the contain. The patience of someone who had learned over years that calm irritates bullies more than anger does. He took the stand and confirmed the sequence of events. Crosswalk encroachment, injured cyclist, distressed child, defendant invoking father's name, defendant resisting instruction to step back, no physical assault, no arrest, citations issued, supplemental referrals made. Mercer asked whether Adrian had eventually complied. Yes. Did he strike anyone? No. Did he attempt to flee? No. Mercer nodded as though recovering scraps. Then Judge Caprio asked, "Officer, in your professional opinion, did Mr. Vale understand the seriousness of the scene at the time?" Reese answered without hesitation, "No, Your Honor." Why? Because he was protecting his status before he was checking on people. You can tell the difference. That sentence may have been the most quietly devastating in the whole hearing. Because law enforcement testimony often gets discussed as procedure. This was character. And it came from a man trained to tell the difference between fear, anger, and ego. Judge Caprio thanked him. Then, unexpectedly, he asked Maria DeLuca to bring him the envelope on the far corner of the bench. Maria handed it over. White envelope. Handwritten name on front. Adrian Vale. Adrian frowned. What is that? Judge Caprio looked at the letter. It was delivered to Chambers before the hearing by your father. Now the room leaned in again. Marcus Vale had not appeared. Not yet. But the presence of that envelope felt like a shadow stepping through the door. Judge Caprio continued, "I have not read it. It is addressed to you. I am told it pertains to your request for family support in this matter." Mercer half rose. "Your Honor, surely this is inappropriate." "Perhaps," Caprio said, "or perhaps a son who believes his father can solve this should know whether his father agrees." He handed the envelope to Officer Silva, who delivered it to Adrian. Adrian turned it over in his hand. His face, until now arranged between anger and embarrassment, became something else. Wary. He opened it. Read. And went still. Really still. His eyes moved once more across the page. Then again, as if rereading might change the words. Judge Caprio said nothing. Nobody did. Finally, Adrian handed the letter to Mercer. His lawyer read it, set his jaw, and passed it back without comment. Judge Caprio waited. Adrian's throat moved. My father says he won't intervene. No one reacted outwardly, but the temperature in the room changed again. He says, Adrian continued, voice tighter now, that if the evidence is accurate, I need to hear this case as a citizen, not as his son. That one sentence did what neither videos nor testimony had fully done. It severed the lifeline. Denise Halpern looked down, perhaps because she had known already. Adrian laughed once under his breath, a sound too small for confidence and too bitter for surrender. Unbelievable. Judge Caprio spoke gently. Sometimes the people who love us refuse to help us lie. That line didn't feel made for television. It felt lived in. Mercer leaned close. Adrian, you need to stop fighting the room. But Adrian was no longer fighting the room. He was fighting the sudden horror of discovering that his father had chosen principle over rescue in public. And that is a different kind of panic. One that strips performance fast. He rose again, but this time slower. Your Honor, he said, voice uneven, may I have a moment? Judge Caprio nodded. You may. Adrian stood at counsel table, letter in one hand, key fob in the other. The same key fob that had flashed like a toy when he walked in. Now it looked absurdly small. He stared at Louis, at Tasha, at Nia, at Alina, at the bodycam monitor gone black again. Then he said, I didn't think anybody got hurt. Louis answered from the gallery before anyone could stop him. Because you didn't look. No one corrected him. Judge Caprio let it stand. Adrian took the hit. You could see him take it, shoulders tightening, eyes lowering. And then, for the first time all day, he addressed someone without a wall around his words. To Ms. Green, he said, I'm sorry. Tasha didn't move. To your daughter, I'm sorry. Nia looked up at him with the unguarded confusion only kids have. To Mr. Ortega and Ms. Pike, I'm sorry. Still no one answered. Because apology is not receipt. It is offer. Judge Caprio knew that. He said, an apology is a sentence, accountability is a process. Quote number 7. That should have ended the morning. But it didn't. Because at 11:02 a.m., the courtroom door opened and Senator Marcus Vail entered. No entourage. No press statement. Dark charcoal overcoat, blue tie, reading glasses in hand. 62 years old and carrying the face of a man who had slept 2 hours and aged 10 years since dawn. Heads turned instantly. A murmur rolled across the gallery. If the earlier moments felt viral, this felt historic. The father had come, and ever. Yon in the room knew he had not come to save his son. The question was what he had come to do instead. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever seen a parent choose truth over image. Because what happened next was the kind of scene politicians spend their whole careers trying to avoid, and fathers spend their whole lives praying they never need. Senator Vail nodded respectfully toward the bench. Your Honor, apologies for the interruption. Judge Caprio nodded once. Senator. Marcus took a seat behind the rail rather than beside his son. That choice alone told the room everything. Adrian turned halfway. Dad. Marcus did not answer. The judge said, we are in the middle of proceedings. Marcus replied, I understand. I am here only if the court permits a statement when appropriate. The restraint in his voice was almost painful. Adrian's composure broke in visible increments. You sent me a letter. Yes. You couldn't say it to my face. Marcus looked at him then. Really looked. I've spent 27 years trying to say things to your face, Adrian. Today may be the first day you can hear them. That line hit the room with parental gravity. No law degree can counterfeit. Judge Caprio allowed a pause, then spoke. "Senator, you may address the court briefly." Marcus stood where he was, not at the witness stand, and said words no political consultant would have written. "My son is not on trial for being my son. He is here because if the evidence is true, he endangered people and then treated public service like private property. I will not defend that. If he carries my name, then he also carries my responsibility to respect the law that others live under without privilege." A reporter in the back actually stopped writing for a beat. That is how strong the moment was. Marcus continued, voice lower now. His mother used to tell him that character is what you do when no one is clapping. Somewhere along the way, he learned the wrong lesson from public life. And some of that is my fault. That admission reached Adrian like a blade. Because parents who confess their part leave children with nowhere to hide from their own. Marcus turned toward Tasha, Lewis, and Alina. "I am sorry for what my son did," and said, "not as a senator, as a citizen, as a father." He said. No applause. This was not that kind of room, but there was a collective shift, an acknowledgement. Everyone in the room knew that statement would be replayed across news clips, social platforms, kitchen tables, campaign offices, barbershops. It was the kind of moment people call integrity only because they rarely witness the cost of it. Adrian whispered, "You just buried me." Marcus answered without raising his voice, "No, I refuse to bury the truth with you." Quote number 8. And that was it. The last support beam snapped. Adrian sank into his chair and covered his mouth with his hand. Not crying. Not yet. Just stunned in the raw, humiliating way people look when the version of the world they have relied on stops existing in public. Judge Caprio let the room settle. Then he did something no one expected. He asked for Adrian's employment file. Not the whole file, just one page. Maria handed over a document from the envelope stack. "Letter of appointment," she said softly. Judge Caprio read, "Mr. Vale, you currently serve as Director of Outreach for the Vale Civic Leadership Initiative and are listed as the announced keynote speaker for the Providence Young Leaders Forum next month." Adrian closed his eyes. "That," said Judge Caprio, "is what the title means when people later say your career ended in 5 minutes. Careers do not end because a judge raises his voice. They end because truth reveals that the title was built on borrowed character." That was not a sentence for him. That was a sentence for everyone watching who had ever confused opportunity with worth. Adrian finally looked up, and now the anger was gone. In its place was something far more frightening. Recognition. "I understand," he said quietly. Judge Caprio asked, "Do you?" Adrian nodded once. "I think I'm starting to." There are moments of realization that look cinematic. Tears, collapse, dramatic music if this were a movie. This was not that. This was a man hearing his own life in plain language and realizing the words fit. Drop a comment telling us whether you think a person like Adrian can really change, because right there the story could still go two ways. Public shame can harden people, or it can break them open. What decided it was not the judge, not the senator, not even the evidence. It was the next 3 minutes. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Vale, I am going to ask you one final question before I determine disposition. When you got out of that car, what mattered most to you?" Adrian stared at the bench. 10 seconds, 15. He could have lied. A cleaner man would have. But clean lies need confidence, and his had been stripped out of him. "Myself," he said. "No one." He reacted. "No one needed to." He continued, voice rougher now. "My car, my name, my image. The fact that people were filming. I thought if I controlled the story, I could control what happened. I didn't look at anybody. Not really. I just looked at the damage to me." Tasha's face softened by the smallest degree. Lewis kept still. Alina bowed her head once, as if receiving an answer to a question she already knew. Judge Caprio asked, "And now?" Adrian swallowed hard. "Now I know the damage wasn't to me." That was the moment. The real one. Not the threat. Not the footage. Not the father's letter. That sentence. Because when arrogance cracks, it rarely does so with elegance. It does so with one ugly, truthful line. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "That is the first honest thing you have said all day." Adrian took it. Did not defend. Did not correct. Took it. Then his voice broke for the first time. "I don't know how to fix it." And there it was. The beginning of humility is not "I'm sorry." It is "I don't know how." The gallery shifted. Some people who had come to enjoy a takedown found themselves unsettled by compassion approaching. That is always the risk when justice gets real. It stops being entertainment and becomes responsibility. Judge Caprio removed his glasses, cleaned them once with a folded cloth, and spoke in the tone that made him beloved and feared in equal measure. "Mercy is not the absence of consequences, Mr. Vale. It is what remains after truth has done its work." Quote number 9. He placed the glasses back on. "I could impose the maximum municipal penalties, refer additional findings aggressively, and let the world feast on your downfall. Some people would enjoy that. Perhaps some in this room would. But the purpose of this court is not to produce spectacle. It is to restore respect where it has been broken." Lewis glanced toward Tasha. Tasha looked at Nia. Nia was drawing circles with her shoe against the floor, half aware that adults were deciding the shape of someone else's future. Judge Caprio continued, "So here is what I am considering: significant fines, restitution for medical and property costs, mandatory driver re-education, a 90-day suspension recommendation, 200 hours of community service, not in a political office but in direct public-facing service, and a written apology to each person harmed." Mercer nodded rapidly. "We would accept those terms." But then came the twist nobody expected. Tasha Green raised her hand. The judge looked surprised. "Ms. Green, may I say something?" "You may." Tasha stood again, Nia beside her. The little girl held the unicorn purse in both hands. Tasha looked at Adrian carefully, the way one looks at a person who has done harm and might still be reachable. "I wanted him punished when I walked in here. I still want consequences. I want my daughter to know people can't just do whatever they want because they have money. But I also work in a hospital. I see what happens when shame turns people meaner. I don't want that. If he's finally hearing this, then don't just fine him. Make him useful." The entire room leaned into her. She went on. "Make him sit where people wait. Make him carry supplies. Make him see old women trying to cross streets and parents trying to calm scared kids. Make him be inconveniently human for a while." There was a softness to the line that made it devastating. Inconveniently human. Judge Caprio smiled sadly. "That is very well said." Then Nia tugged her mother's sleeve. Tasha bent. Nia whispered something. Tasha hesitated, then looked at the bench. "She wants to say something too." The judge's expression warmed instantly. "If she would like." Nia stepped forward in her yellow cardigan, inhaler bouncing lightly at her side, and said the sentence nobody in that courtroom ever forgot. "I don't want him to be scary anymore." No legal training can prepare a room for a child, reducing a moral case to its most honest size. Not evil. Not criminal. Scary. Adrian covered his face. This time he did cry. Quietly, shoulders trembling once then again. No performance. No speech. No image management. Just the involuntary collapse of a man hearing himself described accurately by a child. That was the unexpected compassion moment. not absolution, invitation. And in some ways, it was harder to bear than punishment. Like this video, if you believe children can say in one sentence what adults dance around for hours, because Nia's words changed the hearing. The whole courtroom felt it. Even people who still wanted Adrian humbled now wanted him changed. Judge Caprio let the silence work. Then he asked Lewis, "Mr. Ortega, do you wish to be heard before disposition?" Lewis stood, shifted his brace, and nodded. "Yeah, I do." He faced Adrian. "I'm not as generous as they are. Not yet. I missed work. My son kept asking why Daddy couldn't pick him up. I heard your audio. I saw how you looked at us. So I'm not here to tell the court to go easy. Boo. I will say this. If you ever tell this story later, don't tell it like the judge ruined your life. Tell it like the truth interrupted the one you were ruining yourself." Quote number 10. Even Judge Caprio looked impressed by that. Alina Pike lifted her cane slightly. "And if you're doing service," she added, "I know a church pantry that could use a young back and a humbled mouth." The courtroom laughed through tears. Real laughter, needed laughter, the kind that breaks tension without breaking seriousness. Judge Caprio nodded. "Duly noted, Ms. Pike." Then he delivered the ruling. On the municipal counts before this court, I find the evidence supports reckless operation, failure to yield, and disorderly conduct. I impose fines totaling $2,000. I order restitution for Mr. Ortega's bicycle repair and lost wages pending documentation, and reimbursement of Ms. Green's hospital transport-related expenses associated with the delay and Ms. Pike's treatment copay. I recommend a 90-day license suspension to the appropriate authority and require completion of a certified driver safety program. He paused. The room listened like a held breath. In addition, with the consent of the affected parties, I am ordering 250 hours of community service, 100 hours with pediatric respiratory support fundraising and logistics at Rhode Island Hospital Family Outreach, 75 hours with approved city crosswalk and pedestrian safety initiatives, and 75 hours at a community food pantry selected by probation services in consultation with Ms. Pike's recommendation. A murmur rolled through the gallery. Judge Caprio was not done. "You will submit written apologies, not drafted by campaign staff, not reviewed by public relations personnel, by you, in your own hand. You will also return to this court in 90 days with proof of completion and a personal statement about what you have learned. If you fail, I will remember, and so will this room." Then came the line that later became the quote clipped in 100 reaction videos. "The robe is cloth, Mr. Vale. The power is conscience, and conscience is the one thing your family name cannot buy." Quote number 11. There it was. Ultimate confrontation. Total collapse of the old script. Adrian stood slowly, tears still on his face, not wiped away quickly enough to save pride. "Yes, Your Honor." No swagger. No, with all due respect. Just yes. Judge Caprio looked at him kindly now, but never softly enough to confuse kindness with surrender. "Do not mistake this for rescue. This is work." "I understand." "Do you?" Adrian nodded. "Yes, and if I don't yet, I will." That answer mattered, not perfect, honest enough. Marcus Vale rose from the gallery as if to leave, then stopped. Adrian turned toward him. Their eyes met. There were 1,000 unresolved years in that look. Campaign dinners, missed baseball games, prestige, pressure, grief over Olivia, expectations that had trained one man to perform and another to demand. Marcus stepped closer but stayed outside the rail. He said, "You will resign the forum keynote and your position at the initiative before noon." Adrian closed his eyes once. "Okay." "No press team, no spin." "Okay." "And tonight you are coming home, not because this makes you a child, because you have not been a man." That line broke something open in the room all over again. Adrian nodded. Okay. Judge Caprio rose slightly from the bench, signaling the end. Court is adjourned on this matter. The gavel tapped once. Just once. And the room erupted not into chaos but into the complicated noise of history happening in a small municipal courtroom. Voices, scraped chairs, tears, phones vibrating. Crew members looking at each other with that stunned awareness that they had captured something bigger than a clip, something morally difficult, something people would argue about for months. Because now the question was no longer whether Adrian Vale had been humbled. The question was whether humiliation would harden into resentment or deepen into change. And that answer would not come in court. It would come later. Weeks later, in fluorescent hospital corridors and church basements, and paint-striped intersections where drivers roll through because nobody important seems to be crossing. Drop a comment telling us what sentence from the hearing hit you the hardest, because around this point in the story, most people think the resolution has arrived. It hasn't. The ruling was only the beginning. The real test started when the cameras were gone. The first week after the hearing was brutal. The clip of Adrian threatening Judge Caprio hit local feeds by that evening and national channels by the next morning. His keynote invitation to the Providence Young Leaders Forum was withdrawn at 11:43 a.m., exactly 41 minutes after court adjourned. The Vale Civic Leadership Initiative announced his resignation at 11:58 in a two-sentence statement that sounded so sterile it felt almost cruel. Law school gossip accounts reposted the bodycam audio. Political bloggers called it the cleanest example of nepotism culture imploding in real time. Friends who used to text him yacht photos and cigar bar invitations sent cautious little messages that began with "Crazy day, man." By Thursday, those stopped too. Adrian moved back into his father's house on Blackstone Boulevard, not into the main suite but into the old guest room that had once been his mother's music room before illness turned it into a treatment space. The piano still stood under a dust cover. That detail matters because grief is often where arrogance stores its excuses. The first night, he sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the house settle around him. No applause, no staff, no urgent strategy calls. Just the sound of a life becoming private against his will. Marcus barely spoke the first 2 days, not out of cruelty, out of discipline. When he did speak, it was practical. Your shift at the hospital starts at 7. Probation services emailed the forms. The pantry coordinator's name is Mrs. Elena Borrero. Do not be late. Adrian wanted a fight. Silence denied him one. At Rhode Island Hospital Family Outreach, nobody cared who his father was. That may have been the most medicinal part of the sentence. The coordinator, Elena Marquez, 49, reading glasses on a chain, former respiratory therapist turned volunteer director, handed him a gray polo shirt and a box of disposable masks on his first day. You set up chairs, you break down tables, you carry meal kits. You do not stand around looking redeemable. He almost smiled at that, almost. She saw it. Oh no, don't mistake me for your judge. I don't traffic in quotable wisdom. Then she pointed toward a supply room and said, "Go be useful." Useful turned out to be heavy. Cases of bottled water, folded cots for families sleeping in waiting areas, boxes of coloring books, donation bags, wheelchairs needing to be pushed from one wing to another, sign-in tables with coffee rings and paperwork, mothers who had been awake 36 hours, fathers trying to make insurance calls in hallways, grandparents pretending not to be scared. On day 3, Adrian saw a little boy in a Spider-Man hoodie breathing through a nebulizer mask and looked away too fast, because all he could hear was Nia saying, "I don't want him to be scary anymore." Elena saw that too. "Don't look away," she said quietly. "That's the habit that put you here." He stopped. Looked. The boy's mother was rubbing his back in tiny circles. No speech followed, none was needed. That was how the process worked. Not with dramatic lectures every hour, with repeated, unavoidable encounters with other people's reality. At the pantry, Mrs. Elena Borrero turned out to be 67, sharp as glass, Puerto Rican widow, sneakers squeaking on linoleum as she ran St. Anthony's food room like a military kitchen with rosaries on the walls. She recognized Adrian immediately, then handed him a mop. You can start by cleaning up where the milk leaked. No sermon, just milk. On the second Saturday, Alina Pike came in using her cane and nearly laughed herself breathless when she saw him stacking canned tomatoes. "Oh, they really sent you here," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "No, no. If you're going to learn humility, don't man me like I'm a museum piece. Call me Alina." "Yes, Alina." She studied him better. Then she handed him a clipboard and made him count diapers. At the Crosswalk Initiative, City Safety Officer Omar Haddad, yes, the same parking enforcement worker from the original scene, now revealed as a volunteer trainer for pedestrian safety campaigns, put Adrian in an orange reflective vest and stationed him at Broad and Elmwood with school crossing monitors. There are few more educational experiences for a formerly entitled driver than holding a stop sign, while parents hustle children across in the rain and SUVs inch impatiently forward. At 8:11 one morning, a silver Range Rover rolled its front tire over the line while a grandmother pushed a stroller. Adrian stepped forward instinctively, hand out, and felt the old adrenaline spike in reverse, not as driver, as protector. The driver mouthed something rude through closed glass. Omar leaned over. "Feels different from this side, doesn't it?" Adrian nodded. "Yeah." Omar did not smile. "Good." Weeks passed. Not gracefully. There were setbacks. One afternoon at the pantry, a volunteer recognized him from the viral clip and muttered, "Watch your bike, everybody." The room laughed. Adrian flushed and kept sorting produce. Another day, a hospital dad asked, "Aren't you that senator's kid?" Adrian said yes. The man shook his head and walked off. No forgiveness. No redemption music. Just consequence continuing to live after the judge's ruling. That mattered too, because real change is rarely rewarded on schedule. Hit that subscribe button if you think the hardest part of accountability is not the public apology, but the quiet repetition after everyone stops clapping for your humility. That's where most people quit. Adrian almost did more than once. The lowest point came in week 5. Marcus was away in Hartford for committee meetings. The house was empty except for Adrian and the old piano under its dust cover. He had returned late from a hospital shift where a child in respiratory distress had coded 2 rooms down from where he was restocking meal kits. The child survived. Barely. But Adrian sat in the dark kitchen afterward and shook uncontrollably for 10 minutes. When he got home, he opened the drawer where his mother's music pencils still lay bundled with a ribbon. Beneath them was a folded note in Olivia Vale's handwriting, preserved by accident in the back of the drawer. Not profound, not cinematic. A grocery list on one side. On the other, a half-written reminder to herself from years earlier. Teach Adrian to stop and look at people when they're speaking. He misses whole worlds when he rushes. That sentence broke him harder than the hearing had. Because grief had always been his private excuse. His mother died, therefore his sharpness was understandable. His pressure was understandable. His hunger for image, achievement, motion, victory, control, all understandable. But here was his mother, long before the crash, naming the exact flaw that would later wound strangers. He sat on the kitchen floor and cried in the dark with the paper in his hand. No audience. No judge. No victim. Just truth finally catching him in a place no reputation could buffer. The next morning, he asked Marcus for breakfast. Marcus looked surprised. "All right." They sat in the sunroom where Olivia used to grade elementary music worksheets. Adrian placed the note between them. Marcus read it, closed his eyes. Then Adrian said, "I spent years thinking I became this way after she died." Marcus took a long breath. Loss sharpened it, it didn't invent it. That hurt. It also helped. Because false narratives are comfortable prisons, accurate ones have doors. Marcus looked at his son across the table. Your mother saw your gifts early. She also saw the danger in them. Charm without attention becomes vanity. Confidence without empathy becomes contempt. Ambition without humility becomes appetite. Quote number 12. Adrian nodded, tears in his eyes but no self-pity left in them now. I don't want to live like that anymore. Marcus answered, then stop building your life around being noticed. That became Adrian's private rule. He deleted half his social media that week. Not for optics, quietly, no announcement. He sold the BMW at a loss and used part of the money to prepay Luis Ortega's restitution after receiving the finalized documentation. Luis accepted the payment but returned the note Adrian enclosed unread. That told Adrian something important. Money can close balances. It cannot close injury. The unexpected twist arrived in week 8. Adrian was shelving canned beans at St. Anthony's when Mrs. Borrero handed him an envelope. For you, left by that bike man. Luis. Adrian stared at the handwriting for several seconds before opening it. Inside was a photocopy of a trade school acceptance letter for HVAC night certification and a short note written in block letters. You asked the court how to fix it. You can't fix March 14. But you can stop telling yourself change is a speech. I start classes Monday. Paid the deposit because you covered what you owed. Don't waste what this cost people. No signature beyond LO. Adrian read it twice. Then a third time. He put the letter in his pocket and worked the rest of the shift in silence. That was the breakthrough. Not forgiveness. Respect. Conditional, minimal, hard-earned. Sometimes that matters more. Like this video if you believe redemption should feel earned, not gifted, because Luis did not hug him.